Admiral Jake Morrison stood at the observation deck of the Liberty Orbital Station, his coffee growing cold in his hands as he watched the stars. The morning shift had just begun, and Earth hung below them like a blue marble against the black void. It was supposed to be another quiet day monitoring space traffic and coordinating defense patrols around the planet. The first sign something was wrong came from Lieutenant Bobby Cruz at the sensor station. His voice cracked slightly as he called out the readings that would change everything. Unknown contacts were appearing at the edge of the solar system, dozens of them materializing from hyperspace jumps. The sensors showed massive signatures, far larger than any human vessel ever built. Jake set down his coffee and moved to the main command center. The holographic display showed red dots spreading across the outer system like a disease. Each dot represented a ship, and there were hundreds of them now, all moving inward toward Earth with purpose and speed that made his stomach turn. Dr. Lisa Hayes was already on the emergency communication channel from her laboratory deep beneath Colorado Springs. Her face appeared on the main screen, pale and tense as she reviewed the incoming data. She had been tracking unusual energy signatures for weeks, but nothing had prepared her for this scale of arrival. The alien ships were unlike anything in human databases. They moved in perfect formations, their crystalline hulls catching starlight and reflecting it in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Each vessel was easily 10 times the size of Earth's largest battleship, and they numbered in the thousands as more continued to arrive through hyperspace portals. Captain Roy Bennett scrambled his fighter squadron from the lunar base, though everyone knew conventional aircraft would be useless against such a fleet. His pilots were brave, but their weapons were designed for fighting other humans, not whatever technology these visitors possessed. Still, they had to try something while the planet's leaders figured out how to respond. The alien fleet moved with mechanical precision through the solar system, ignoring the small human ships that tried to intercept them. Communication attempts failed completely. Every frequency was either ignored or met with silence that felt more ominous than any threat. Jake tried to coordinate Earth's defenses from the Liberty Station, but it quickly became clear how inadequate their preparations were. The orbital platforms had been built to stop asteroids and rogue ships, not an invasion fleet that could probably destroy entire planets. Every weapon they possessed seemed like toys compared to the approaching force. The aliens reached Earth's orbital space in less than 6 hours. Their ships took positions around the planet in a formation that blocked escape routes and covered every major population center. The precision of their deployment suggested they had been studying human settlements for a long time. When the attack began, it was swift and terrible. Beams of pure energy lanced down from the alien vessels, cutting through Earth's atmosphere like knives through paper. The first target was New York, where millions of people had no time to even understand what was happening before their city began to burn. Jake watched helplessly as the defensive satellites exploded one by one under alien fire. Each explosion represented months of work and billions of dollars, destroyed in seconds by weapons that seemed to operate on principles beyond human understanding. The Liberty Station shook as debris from destroyed platforms struck their hull. Roy Bennett led his fighters in desperate attack runs against the alien ships, but their missiles simply dissolved against energy shields that flickered like soap bubbles. His squadron was cut down within minutes, their ships vaporized by defensive systems that barely seemed to notice their presence. The bombardment continued for 6 devastating hours. Los Angeles, London, Tokyo, and a dozen other major cities suffered direct hits from weapons that seemed designed to cause maximum destruction with surgical precision. The aliens were making a statement about their capabilities while leaving enough infrastructure intact to be useful later. Dr. Hayes coordinated emergency evacuations from her bunker, but there was nowhere safe to run. The alien ships covered the entire planet, and their energy weapons could reach any point on the surface within seconds. All she could do was document the attack and hope someone would survive to learn from the data. As quickly as it had begun, the bombardment stopped. The alien ships pulled back to higher orbit, leaving Earth cities burning and its people in shock. Emergency services struggled to respond to destruction on a scale that made natural disasters look minor by comparison. Then came the message. A holographic projection appeared simultaneously in every major city, showing a figure that was clearly not human. It stood 8 feet tall with crystalline skin that reflected light in impossible ways. When it spoke, The words came in perfect English through speakers that had materialized from nowhere. High Commander Vextar introduced himself as the representative of the Zephyrian Empire, a coalition of 12 advanced species that had conquered hundreds of worlds across the galaxy. His voice carried the weight of absolute authority as he delivered humanity's ultimatum. Earth had one solar cycle, exactly 24 hours, to surrender completely to imperial rule. All governments would dissolve, all military forces would stand down, and humanity would accept its place as the newest servant species in the galactic order. Resistance would result in the complete destruction of all life on the planet. The hologram faded, leaving behind a silence more terrible than the bombardment. 10 million people were dead. Entire cities lay in ruins, and Earth's defenders had been swept aside like insects. The message was clear. Humanity was completely outmatched by forces beyond their understanding. But in the deepest levels of the Pentagon, something stirred in response to the crisis. General Paul Carter moved through corridors that most military personnel didn't know existed, past security checkpoints that required genetic verification and psychological screening. At the end of the corridor was a vault that contained humanity's greatest secret. Protocol Omega had been authorized by only 12 people on Earth, and half of them were now dead in the bombardment. The project had been so classified that even the president had only learned about it 3 months ago. As Carter entered his authorization codes, he wondered if the aliens had any idea what they had just awakened. The countdown began immediately. 24 hours to surrender or face total annihilation. The Zephyrian Empire had conquered 847 worlds using exactly this method. Earth was meant to be number 848, another easy victory in their expansion across the galaxy. They had no way of knowing that this particular world had been preparing for exactly this moment. 3 months before the alien attack, Dr. Kevin Ross was working late in his laboratory beneath MIT. The underground facility was so deep that most people forgot it existed, hidden behind layers of security that made the Pentagon look casual. Kevin had been working on dark matter research for 5 years, but tonight felt different because tonight he was going to prove that everything they thought they knew about physics was wrong. Susan Blake, his chief engineer, was running final checks on the containment field when the breakthrough happened. She had been skeptical of Kevin's theories about weaponizing dark matter, but the equations were too elegant to ignore. Dark matter made up most of the universe, yet humans barely understood what it was or how it worked. The experiment started small, just a few particles of dark matter held in a magnetic bottle no bigger than a coffee cup. Kevin had theorized that dark matter could be manipulated to create tears in space-time itself, essentially deleting matter from existence rather than simply destroying it. The implications were terrifying and fascinating in equal measure. When the first test worked, Susan actually stepped backward from the control panel. A small metal cube they had placed in the target chamber simply vanished, not vaporized or disintegrated, but completely erased from reality. The space where it had been was perfectly empty, as if the cube had never existed at all. Colonel Amy Foster arrived at the laboratory within hours of the successful test. She had been monitoring unusual energy signatures from the facility and knew immediately that something revolutionary had happened. Amy had spent her career overseeing military applications of new technology, but this was beyond anything she had ever encountered. The potential for weaponization was obvious and terrifying. A device that could erase matter from existence would make nuclear weapons look like firecrackers. But Amy also understood that such technology came with responsibilities that could change the course of human history forever. Kevin explained his theories to Amy using language she could understand without a doctorate in theoretical physics. Dark matter existed in dimensions that normal matter could not access, but with the right energy patterns it could be forced to interact with regular space-time. The result was a cascade effect that essentially told the universe that whatever was targeted had never existed. Susan showed Amy the recordings of their tests, watching her face grow pale as the implications became clear. They had started with small objects, but the mathematics suggested the effect could be scaled up indefinitely. In theory, they could erase entire spaceships or even planets from existence. Amy made several encrypted phone calls that night, speaking to people whose names were classified above Susan's security level. By morning, the laboratory was swarming with military personnel and scientists who spoke in whispers and carried documents that would never see daylight. Lieutenant Commander Chris, Wood arrived from the Naval Research Division, with authorization to expand the project immediately. Chris was a former astrophysicist who had joined the military after discovering that pure research was too slow for his tastes. He understood both the science and the strategic implications of Kevin's breakthrough. The project was given the codename Void Strike and classified at levels that required genetic verification to access. Only 12 people on Earth would know the full scope of what they were building, and half of them would be dead within 6 months from accidents that were probably not accidents. Chris developed the deployment strategy, while Kevin and Susan worked on scaling up the technology. The plan was ambitious and terrifying. 7 massive dark matter cannons hidden throughout the solar system, each one disguised as civilian infrastructure that enemy scouts would ignore. The first cannon was built inside an asteroid mining station near Jupiter, its true purpose hidden behind legitimate excavation equipment. The second was concealed within a deep space observatory that actually functioned normally while housing enough firepower to delete entire fleets from existence. Amy oversaw the construction with a team of engineers who were told they were building advanced sensor arrays. Only the core technical staff knew they were actually constructing humanity's most powerful weapons, devices that could quite literally end wars by making enemy forces cease to exist. Each cannon required massive amounts of power and precision targeting systems that pushed human technology to its absolute limits. The energy requirements were so enormous that each weapon could only fire once before destroying itself in the process. Kevin spent sleepless nights refining the targeting algorithms, while Susan worked on the power systems that would channel enough energy to tear holes in reality. They both understood that they were creating something that could protect humanity or destroy it depending on who controlled the weapons. The mysterious artifacts found in the Kuiper Belt 5 years earlier provided crucial components for the targeting systems. The alien technology was thousands of years more advanced than human science, but Kevin had found ways to integrate it with their dark matter research. Chris coordinated with space traffic control to ensure that the cannon installations looked exactly like legitimate civilian projects. Cargo ships delivered components that were listed as mining equipment or scientific instruments, while the real weapons took shape in hidden compartments that did not appear on any official blueprints. The 7th and final cannon was completed just 2 weeks before the alien fleet arrived at Earth. It was hidden inside what appeared to be a routine communications satellite, orbiting Earth in a pattern that would allow it to target any threats approaching the planet. President Helen Cruz was briefed on the project in a meeting so classified that no records were kept of what was discussed. She understood that authorizing the use of such weapons would change humanity forever, but she also knew that some threats required responses that conventional military thinking could never address. Amy established the command protocols that would allow the weapons to be fired in coordination from Earth. Each cannon operator would be alone in their station when the time came, with no communication possible once the firing sequence began. The weapons were too powerful to risk any interference or second thoughts. Kevin and Susan ran final tests on the targeting systems, knowing that they would only get one chance to use their creations. The dark matter cannons were humanity's ultimate trump card, but they were also a line that could never be uncrossed once they fired their first shots. As reports of alien scout ships reached Earth's outer monitoring stations, Amy activated the first phase of Protocol Omega. 7 hidden weapons that could rewrite the laws of physics were now armed and ready, waiting for the moment when humanity would show the galaxy what happened when they pushed too far. The alien fleet returned exactly 24 hours after delivering their ultimatum, emerging from hyperspace with the confidence of predators who had never known defeat. High Commander Vextar stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the primitive blue world grow larger on his screens. In his long career of conquest, he had destroyed 847 civilizations, and Earth would be the simplest victory yet. The Zephyrian Armada numbered 5,000 warships, each one capable of reducing planets to molten slag within hours. Their crystalline hulls gleamed with energy that could bend space and time, technology so advanced that most species surrendered immediately upon seeing it. The ships moved in perfect formation, a display of military precision that had terrified countless worlds into submission. Captain Danny Price commanded the human fleet that rose to meet them, though calling it a fleet was generous. 200 ships had been assembled from everything Earth could spare, military vessels, converted cargo haulers, and civilian craft fitted with whatever weapons could be mounted in time. Against 5,000 alien warships, they looked like toys facing a hurricane. Danny knew his mission was not to win but to buy time, though he had not been told what Earth needed that time for. His orders were to engage the enemy at the edge of the solar system and hold them back as long as possible. Every minute his ship survived might mean the difference between victory and total extinction. The space battle began when the fleets were still millions of kilometers apart. Alien energy weapons reached across the void with impossible accuracy, while human missiles and plasma cannons seemed pathetic by comparison. The first human ship to die was the destroyer Franklin, vaporized so completely that its crew never had time to send a distress signal. Commander Lisa Park watched from the bridge of the cruiser Defiant as her task force was systematically torn apart. The alien weapons cut through human shields like they were made of paper, while their own defensive systems easily deflected everything the humans could throw at them. It was not a battle but an execution carried out with mechanical efficiency. High Commander Vextar observed the human resistance with mild interest, noting how primitively they fought compared to other species he had conquered. Their ships were crude, their weapons laughably weak, and their tactics showed no understanding of advanced space warfare. Yet they continued fighting even when victory was clearly impossible. A trait he found both puzzling and pointless. Danny's flagship, the retrofitted battleship Victory, managed to survive longer than most by constantly changing position and using debris from destroyed ships as cover. His crew worked frantically to coordinate the remaining human vessels, but the tactical situation was hopeless from the beginning. The alien fleet pressed forward through the solar system, brushing aside human resistance like someone walking through spiderwebs. For every alien ship that suffered minor damage, 50 human vessels were completely destroyed. The mathematics of the engagement were clear. Earth's defenders would be extinct long before they could inflict any meaningful harm on their attackers. Deep beneath Colorado Springs, Dr. Kevin Ross worked desperately to align the hidden dark matter cannons. Each weapon required precise gravitational calculations to target the enemy fleet's formation, and the aliens were moving in patterns that made accurate targeting extremely difficult. One mistake in the mathematics would waste their only chance to strike back. Susan Blake monitored the power systems that would feed energy to the 7 cannons, watching as massive capacitors charged to levels that pushed human technology beyond safe limits. The weapons had been designed to fire once before destroying themselves, but now she wondered if they would even survive the charging process. Lieutenant Commander Chris Wood coordinated targeting data from his command bunker, using information transmitted by the dying human fleet to track alien ship positions. Each destroyed human vessel provided more intelligence about enemy formations, purchased with the lives of brave crews who knew they were sacrificing themselves for a greater purpose. The alien advance continued relentlessly toward Earth, with High Commander Vextar growing impatient at the unnecessary delay. His fleet could have swept aside human resistance in minutes, but he preferred to let his commanders gain experience by dealing with primitives who still used chemical rockets and metal projectiles. Admiral Jake Morrison, still aboard the battered Liberty Station, transmitted humanity's final message to the approaching alien fleet. His voice was steady despite knowing that his orbital platform would be among the first targets once the aliens reached Earth's immediate space. The message was simple and direct, broadcast on all frequencies so that every alien ship would receive it clearly. Morrison's words carried the weight of an entire species facing extinction, delivered with the quiet dignity of someone who knew he was about to die but refused to beg for mercy. "This is Earth's last warning to the galactic attackers," Morrison said into the communication array. "Strike again and be destroyed." The words seemed laughably defiant coming from a species whose fleet was being annihilated before their eyes, whose planet was defenseless against weapons that could crack continents. High Commander Vexitar actually laughed when he heard the transmission, a sound like crystal chimes that his crew had learned to fear. Human arrogance was entertaining in its complete disconnection from reality. They spoke of destroying his fleet, when they could barely scratch the paint on his smallest escort vessels. The alien fleet reached Earth's orbital space with only a few dozen human ships still fighting. Danny Price's Victory was among the survivors, its hull scarred and its weapons nearly depleted, but still transmitting targeting data to whatever secret project required such desperate sacrifice. Lisa Parks. Defiant had lost most of its weapons but continued to coordinate rescue operations for the crews of destroyed ships. Her sensors detected massive energy buildups throughout the solar system, power signatures unlike anything in human databases, but she had no idea what they meant. The 7 hidden dark matter cannons reached full charge simultaneously, their targeting systems locked onto the alien fleet's formation. Kevin Ross entered the final firing sequence, knowing that once he pressed the activation key, there would be no way to stop what followed. High Commander Vextar prepared to give the order for Earth's destruction, confident that this primitive world would join the long list of his conquests. His fleet moved into final bombardment positions, energy weapons charging to reduce human civilization to radioactive ash. But hidden throughout the solar system, 7 weapons that could rewrite the laws of physics were about to announce that humanity would not go quietly into the night. At coordinates deep in space near Jupiter, the asteroid mining station Omega-1 began to transform. What had appeared to be a simple industrial facility for months suddenly opened like a mechanical flower, revealing a massive barrel that crackled with energy, darker than the void between stars. Commander Tony Hill sat alone in the control chamber, his finger hovering over the final activation switch. 6 other hidden stations throughout the solar system underwent similar transformations. The Deep Space Observatory near Saturn revealed its true purpose as weapon systems emerged from compartments that had never appeared on any blueprint. A communications satellite in Earth orbit split apart to expose targeting arrays that had been disguised as routine antenna equipment. Dr. Kevin Ross watched from his bunker as 7 years of theoretical work became terrifying reality. The dark matter cannons were charging to power levels that made nuclear reactors look like flashlights. Each weapon contained enough focused energy to tear holes in the fabric of space-time itself, turning scientific theory into humanity's last desperate gamble. The targeting calculations were perfect, or at least as perfect as human mathematics could make them. The alien fleet had arranged itself in a formation that would allow all 7 cannons to converge their fire on the densest concentration of enemy ships. High Commander Vextar had unknowingly positioned his forces for maximum destruction. Susan Blake monitored the power systems as they reached levels that should have been impossible with human technology. The fusion reactors feeding the cannons were operating beyond their design limits, held together by engineering that pushed the boundaries of what matter could withstand. Each weapon would destroy itself when it fired, but not before unleashing forces that could rewrite reality. Lieutenant Commander Chris Wood gave the final targeting confirmation from his command bunker. Every calculation had been checked and double-checked. Every variable accounted for as much as possible when dealing with weapons that operated on principles barely understood by their creators. There would be no second chance if the first shot missed. Kevin entered the firing sequence into the master control system, watching as 7 separate countdown timers began their final descent to 0. Once started, the process could not be stopped or reversed. In 60 seconds, humanity would either save itself or doom the entire solar system to an expanding zone of nothingness. High Commander Vextar was reviewing the final bombardment plans when his sensor officer reported unusual energy readings throughout the human solar system. The signatures were unlike anything in Zephyrian databases, showing power levels that seemed impossible for such a primitive species to generate. He ordered immediate investigation. The 7 dark matter cannons fired simultaneously at exactly the same moment, their beams invisible to normal sensors but devastating beyond comprehension. 7 streams of absolute nothingness streaked across space at speeds that made light seem slow, converging on the alien fleet with precision that defied the chaos of space warfare. Tony Hill died instantly when his cannon fired, vaporized by energies that his human body could not survive. The same fate met the 6 other operators who had volunteered for this suicide mission. Their sacrifice lasted only microseconds, but it unleashed forces that would reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. The dark matter beams struck the alien fleet like the fist of an angry god. They did not explode or burn or melt the crystalline ships they hit. Instead, they simply erased them from existence, creating expanding spheres of perfect void where 3,000 alien vessels had been just moments before. High Commander Vextar had perhaps 5 seconds to understand what was happening to his fleet. His flagship's sensors detected readings that violated every known law of physics as reality itself, began to unravel around him. The space where his ships had been was not empty but genuinely absent, as if those regions of the universe had been deleted. The void spheres continued to expand outward from the impact points, consuming everything they touched with absolute efficiency. Alien ships that tried to flee found themselves caught in zones where matter simply could not exist. They did not die so much as cease to have ever been, erased from history as well as the present. Captain Danny Price watched from his damaged battleship as 3/5 of the alien fleet simply vanished. His sensors could not explain what had happened, showing only expanding areas of nothingness where thousands of enemy ships had been moments before. The remaining alien forces were fleeing in panic, their perfect formation shattered by weapons they could not understand. Commander Lisa Park tried to coordinate rescue operations as debris from the space battle drifted past her ship, but the void spheres made navigation treacherous. Her instruments could not penetrate the expanding zones of nothingness, leaving her to guide rescue ships around areas where space itself seemed to have been torn apart. The surviving Zephyrian forces fled toward the edge of the solar system in complete disorder. Ships that had conquered hundreds of worlds were running from an enemy they could not comprehend, their crews traumatized by watching their comrades simply stop existing. High Commander Vextar's flagship was among the fleeing vessels, its commander stunned into silence. Dr. Kevin Ross monitored the expanding void spheres from his bunker, growing increasingly alarmed as the weapons proved more powerful than his calculations had predicted. The spheres were supposed to stabilize after consuming their initial targets, but they continued to grow at a steady rate that suggested they might never stop. Susan Blake watched the power readings from the destroyed cannons, realizing that the weapons had been even more unstable than they had feared. The feedback from the firing had created resonance effects in local space-time that were feeding energy into the void spheres, causing them to expand beyond their intended parameters. The alien retreat became a rout as more ships were caught by the expanding zones of nothingness. Vessels that had seemed invincible hours before were fleeing for their lives from an enemy that did not fight by any rules they understood. The Zephyrian Empire's reputation for invincibility was dissolving along with their fleet. Captain Price led the surviving human ships in rescue operations, picking up escape pods and damaged vessels while avoiding the growing void zones. His crew worked frantically to save every life they could, human and alien alike. Though the aliens seemed too shocked to appreciate the gesture, Earth had won its first victory against the Galactic Empire, but at a cost that was still being calculated. 7 weapons that could delete matter from existence had been fired, creating permanent scars in space that would serve as monuments to humanity's refusal to surrender. The question now was whether those scars would continue growing until they consumed everything. 6 months after the battle that shattered the Zephyrian Empire, the expanding void spheres finally stabilized at the edge of the solar system. Dr. Kevin Ross had spent sleepless weeks calculating when the zones of nothingness would stop growing, and his relief was visible when the last measurements confirmed that space-time had healed itself around the damaged areas. The permanent dead zone served as a grim reminder of humanity's victory and the price of that triumph. 7 regions of space where nothing could exist, not even vacuum, marked the spots where Earth's most powerful weapons had fired their only shots. Ships traveling through the solar system had to navigate carefully around these scars in reality. Ambassador Ellen Gray stood in the reception hall of the newly constructed Excalibur space station, preparing to meet with representatives of the species that had tried to destroy her world. She was Earth's first interstellar diplomat, a job that had not existed a year ago when humanity believed it was alone in the galaxy. Zephyrian delegation arrived in ships that looked nothing like the warships that had attacked Earth. These vessels were smaller, less aggressive in design, and flew with white energy fields that every spacefaring species recognized as symbols of surrender. High Commander Vextar was not among them, having died in the retreat when his damaged flagship suffered critical failures. Sub-Commander Rex Hahn led the alien delegation with the careful movements of someone who knew his species' survival depended on these negotiations. The Zephyrian Empire had been built on fear and overwhelming technological superiority, but humanity had proven that even the most advanced weapons could be countered by determination and desperate ingenuity. Ellen listened as Rexon explained how their empire had controlled hundreds of worlds through the simple threat of annihilation. Most species surrendered immediately when faced with the Zephyrian fleet, choosing servitude over extinction. But Earth had done something unprecedented by fighting back with weapons that exceeded even Zephyrian understanding. Admiral Jake Morrison, now head of Earth's new space command, oversaw the establishment of humanity's first interstellar fleet from his office aboard the Excalibur station. The ships being built in Earth's orbital shipyards were designed for exploration and defense, incorporating lessons learned from studying captured alien technology. The news of Earth's victory had spread across the galaxy faster than anyone had expected. Species that had suffered under galactic empires for thousands of years were beginning to declare independence, inspired by the small blue world that had said no to conquest and made it stick with devastating effectiveness. Dr. Ross worked in a new laboratory built specifically for defensive research, having refused all requests to rebuild the dark matter cannons. The weapons had been too dangerous even for their creators to control, and the expanding void zones proved that some victories came at prices too high to pay again. Other alien species began arriving at Earth within weeks of the Zephyrian surrender, some seeking alliance and others begging for protection from empires that were now turning their attention to easier targets. The Centauri Federation offered trade agreements, while the Helix Collective requested military assistance against their former overlords. Susan Blake led the engineering teams that were reverse engineering alien technology for peaceful purposes. The crystalline power systems used by the Zephyrians could revolutionize human energy production, while their faster-than-light communication networks would connect Earth to the galactic community. Lieutenant Commander Chris Wood, now promoted to Admiral, established the Terran defense grid throughout human space. The new defensive platforms used conventional weapons enhanced with alien technology, providing protection without the reality-warping dangers of the dark matter cannons. Ellen found herself mediating disputes between species that had been enemies for millennia, using Earth's unique position as the planet that had defeated the Zephyrians to broker peace agreements. Humanity's reputation for deadly effectiveness made other species surprisingly willing to compromise rather than risk provoking another.
War, the void zones became pilgrimage sites for
species that had suffered under galactic oppression. Representatives from dozens of worlds came to see the proof that even the most powerful empires could be defeated, though few understood the true nature of the weapons that had created those permanent scars in space. Captain Danny Price, now commanding the exploration vessel Horizon, led missions to distant galaxies where word of Earth's victory was inspiring new rebellions. His ship carried diplomats and scientists rather than weapons, but its presence reminded everyone that humanity was willing to fight for freedom. The Zephyrian Empire collapsed within months as member species declared independence, and former subject worlds refused to pay tribute. Rexhan reported that their military was in complete disarray, with many commanders refusing orders, and some fleets simply abandoning their posts to become traders or explorers. Admiral Morrison established protocols for sharing defensive technology with Earth's new allies while keeping the most dangerous research classified. The galaxy was becoming a more peaceful place, but humanity had learned that some weapons were too powerful to exist even in the hands of those who created them. Kevin spent long hours in his laboratory working on projects that could heal the damage done by war rather than causing new destruction. His research into space-time manipulation was now focused on repairing the void zones, though early calculations suggested the scars might be permanent. The transformation of galactic politics was remarkable to observe. Species that had accepted conquest as inevitable were now forming defensive alliances and mutual aid agreements. The age of galactic empires was ending, replaced by federations and republics that preferred negotiation to annihilation. Ellen received reports from across the galaxy of former imperial species adapting to life without the threat of constant expansion. Many were discovering that trade and cooperation were more profitable than conquest, especially when potential targets might possess weapons capable of erasing entire fleets from existence. Earth's message continued to echo across the stars long after the last alien warship had fled the solar system. Strike again and be destroyed had become more than a warning. It was a promise that some species would fight back no matter the odds, and that the price of aggression might be higher than any empire could afford to pay. The galaxy had learned that humanity would defend itself and its allies with devastating effectiveness when pushed too far. But more importantly, it had discovered that diplomatic solutions were suddenly much more attractive than military ones. when the alternative was facing weapons that could delete fleets from reality itself.